Hello, good afternoon from Brussels. Welcome to this session of this year's European Sustainable Energy Week. Good morning to the colleagues online in Canada and the US, to whom I will give the floor later on. My name is Frank Sivan-Thomas. I'm head of unit in DG Employment and Social Affairs and a unit dealing with fair, green and digital transitions and research. And we are very honored to host this session together with our partners in the United States and Canada, who will explain to you an initiative we have co-launched together and we are implementing in the context of the Clean Energy Ministerial. This year's Sustainable Energy Week here at the European Commission in Brussels carries the title Accelerating the Clean Energy Transition Towards Lower Bills and Greater Skills. So obviously the social dimension, the skills dimension of the energy transition, which has always been center stage of the European commitment to the Green Deal and to climate neutrality, has further gained in importance in the run-up or in the context of the energy price crisis, which we have encountered, and also in the new geopolitical context, which requires to further accelerate our transition towards climate neutrality. You will learn today in this session from the experience of the Clean Energy Ministerial initiative called Empowering People, Skills and Inclusivity for Just Transition, which aims to support a fair energy transition with the right skills in place and with a due attention to workforce diversity and just transition issues, for which the European Commission is co-lead together with the governments of Canada and the United States. You are all well aware of the context in which we have launched this initiative and are carrying forward our work. The European Union pledged to be climate neutral by 2050 and has set ambitious emission reduction targets by 2030. In this context, fairness always has been one of the explicit objectives stated in the European Green Deal. To deliver on our ambitious emission reduction targets for 2030, the Commission has put forward in 2021 a comprehensive legislative package called the Fit for 55 package, with a number of initiatives bringing forward this transition, promoting both policies and technologies which help to bring about a fair and fast energy transition, including through faster renewables deployment and related higher targets for the renewable rollout. There's also growing evidence in this context that in order to tackle climate change and contribute to reducing emissions, we need to address the large inequalities in carbon emissions. Recent data produced, for example, by the IPCC and also the World Inequality Lab have shown that the top 10 emitters are responsible for close to 50% of all emissions, while the bottom 50% for only 12% of the total. And the World Inequality Lab in its latest report also has highlighted that for the first time in history, within country carbon inequalities are at least as large as across-country inequalities. So with this, we certainly cannot look and should not overlook the employment and social implications of the clean energy transition, because only if we put the right policies in place, the right policies to ensure the right skill mix of the workforce, to help people transit into new quality jobs, and to roll out the technologies, including renewable energy, as we mentioned, with public support. Only if such policies are in place, we can ensure that the expected net job gains and overall welfare gains will materialize. Such job gains, we expect them in several sectors, including notably energy, transport, but also the circular economy and construction. In all of this and in designing our policy packages, we need to take into account, as I said, the employment and social impacts as well as distributional impacts to make sure that the transition can happen in a fair and inclusive way and that nobody is left behind, as we say, in the context of the European Green Deal. That is that the move towards new forms of energy production and consumption is affordable, new forms of mobility, new forms of consumption overall is affordable to people overall. So this needs an integrated policy approach, one which takes along people, which follows a whole of society approach involving social partners, stakeholders, and civil society at large. In all of this, skills mapping, better knowledge of which reskilling and upskilling needs we are facing, and improved skills intelligence and skills forecasts are essential to identify the sectors and domains that will see labor demand increase, and to face labor and skill shortages, which we see on the rise in Europe. If not addressed properly, such skill and labor shortages can become a real obstacle to our ambitions to meet our ambitious climate and energy targets. And we do support in the Employment and Commission at large a number of policies to move forward and to enhance the skills base of the European workforce, including through a taxonomy, a European skills competence and occupations taxonomy to classify skills for the green transition, and also by developing a European competence framework on sustainability, the so-called Green Comp framework, which maps out the knowledge, skills and attitudes that learners in all phases and stages of education and training need for the green transition. Obviously, these policy frameworks come with investment needs, come with significant investment needs, which have been estimated into the billions. The recently proposed Net Zero Industry Act by the European Commission has highlighted that there's a potential to create around 500,000 new jobs in clean tech industries, but requiring a need to support reskilling and upskilling investments of around 4.5 billion euros, for example. There are tools in place, investment schemes and budgetary support in place in the European Union, including in the context of the Next Generation EU program, the cohesion funds, the European Social Fund Plus in particular, and many other funds on our site. Last but not least, I would like to highlight that we are also engaging our international partners in these discussions on the need of reskilling, upskilling, which is a global need, which is a global endeavor to bring the energy transition, clean energy transition forward. Last year at COP, the European Commission has, together with the ILO, co-hosted the first ever Just Transition Pavilion, which also has seen exchanges and debates on good practices for reskilling, upskilling workers in the green transition and addressing related structural challenges, for example, the underrepresentation of women and other labor groups in the labor market in renewable sectors. In today's session, we want to focus on the experience of the Clean Energy Ministerial Initiative Empowering People. This initiative was launched 2 years ago upon initiative of Canada, as one of the speakers will explain, and it was put in place together with the International Energy Agency and also the International Labour Organization to highlight the socio-economic elements of the energy transition that until then had been felt missing in the clean energy ministerial context, and that relate to empowering people and promoting just and equitable transitions through skills, through inclusivity, and through workforce development. With this, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker today. Our first speaker will be Mrs. Melisande Liu. She is Partnerships Manager at the Clean Energy Ministerial Secretariat located in Paris. She has been a key actor enabling the co-leads to successfully work together and implement the actions foreseen under the initiative. Melisande will present the overview of the Clean Energy Ministerial functioning overall and the key elements that differentiate it from other international fora. I would like to before starting, remind all participants, both online and in the room, that you please can post your questions on Slido. You will have received a Slido link. I will also repeat it throughout the session. It's hashtag EUSEW2023 MA. So hashtag European Sustainable Energy Week, EUSEW2023, and MA, which is the abbreviation for this meeting room. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. I'm here with my colleague Pablo Jacome Alvarez next to me, who is our main responsible for our Clean Energy Ministerial activities, among others, and who will follow your questions closely and bring them to the discussion. With this, Melisande, I would like to turn to you. The floor is yours to present the Clean Energy Ministerial activities overall.
Thank you, Frank and Pablo. It's a great honor to be here today and to speak on behalf of the SEM Secretariat. Thank you also for putting together this great session. We're really looking forward to giving you an overview of the SEM. My name is Melisande Liu. I'm Partnerships Manager at the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is housed within the International Energy Agency, IEA, in Paris. I currently lead SEM's work and SEM's engagement with countries such as China, Germany, Brazil, the UAE, Spain, Mexico, and Portugal. I also cover all of SEM's technical work on long-term energy scenarios, solar supply chains, green skills and workforce, as well as regional and global interconnection and investment and finance. So I'm here today to speak about SEM's context, its background, its mission, its membership, and why it is such an important and powerful tool for multilateralism in times of combating climate change. Next slide, please. And just to flag, I do not see the slides, but I think that's fine. So, yes. Thanks a lot. The next slide, please. Yes. So the Clean Energy Ministerial, SEM, as we call it, was originally conceived at the U.S. Department of Energy in 2009. It was conceived by then U.S. Secretary of Energy under the Obama administration and Nobel laureate, Professor Stephen Chu, who had witnessed the challenges surrounding the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Summit. And at its inception and still today, the SEM has remained very true to its original mission, and that is to accelerate the clean energy transition worldwide through deployment and concrete policy actions. Next slide, please. The SEM was initially established with the premise that by working together, countries could get more done more quickly than by working in silos. And indeed, this premise still holds true today. So the recently published IEA Net Zero by 2050 roadmap, which was published in 2021, found just that, and that is, if we want to achieve net zero globally by 2050, this will depend largely on how well and how effective governments and countries collaborate together. And this international collaboration needs to go beyond sectors, beyond jurisdictions and value chains. Whether it's the closing of the world's 870 gigawatt of existing coal capacity and the facilitation of substitutes, or whether it's the electrification of transport, the large-scale deployment of battery electric trucks, or international standards for fuel cell electric technologies, international collaboration is really key. And so achieving net zero by mid-century is therefore not simply a matter of all governments striving to bring their national emissions to net zero, but it's really about coordinating global action on climate change. And so the IEA predicts in this Net Zero by 2050 roadmap that without this global coordinated efforts, net zero will not be achieved by 2050, but only 2 decades later, so by around 2090. And this would mean really a big loss, not only for developed and developing countries. So for developed countries, it would really mean that net zero would be achieved far more difficult and far more costly than it would be through international collaboration. And as we all know, for developing economies, the path to net zero would be highly uncertain and unclear without international support. And so in recognition of these realities, the SEM members have also recently agreed to step up their efforts and ambition to really scale up their ambitions this decade by increasing the pace of the clean energy transition, by making sure that it not only focuses on the power sector, but that it transcends also other sectors, and that it really puts people at the center of the clean energy transition, and focuses more on consumers and citizens. Next slide, please. So SEM's approach to tackling climate change is really strongly unique. So united by one single mission, and that is to accelerate the global clean energy transition worldwide. SEM members have developed a very much results-driven way of collaborating with each other. One that is flexible enough to bring all major economies together, and one that's yet very specific enough to deliver concrete results and impact. And unlike other fora, no time is spent on negotiating policy communiques or achieving anonymous consensus among all members. Instead, the focus of the SEM really lies on practical actions. It focuses on a roll up your sleeves mindset and a very much bottom up, choose as you go model. Next slide, please. And now when we talk about the value proposition of the SEM, there are really three key features of the SEM that I'd like to speak about. Firstly, the SEM really brings together a very energized and powerful and committed global community that form the heart of the SEM. And the centerpiece of this is, of course, our 29 SEM member governments, who together represent around 80% of the global investment in clean energy and 90% of clean energy capacity. So really potent and powerful community of those countries that can really make a change. And then in addition to this, we also work together with 26 other governments and countries that regularly engage with us through our work streams. Next slide, please. But the SEM community is not just governments and policymakers, but it includes some of the world's largest and leading research institutions, companies, industries, non-government agencies, and international experts who all contribute their knowledge and insights to the work of SEM, and particularly here, as you see, the IEA, the IRENAs, the WECs, and the WEFs, and UNIDOs of our world. Next slide, please. And we try to convene this really powerful community once every year at the very highest level. So these are our so-called ministerial meetings, where we bring together energy leaders from our 29 member countries to discuss the state of the global energy transition, and where international cooperation really needs to be strengthened and deepened in order to reach net zero by mid-century. And so our members take turns in hosting these ministerial meetings, with the very first SEM ministerial being hosted by the US, the second by the UAE, and the third by the UK. And this year, we're really much looking forward to India hosting our 13th ministerial meeting, and Brazil our 14th ministerial meeting next year. Next slide, please. And to give you a little more insight on how these ministerial meetings work, and also of the convening power of these ministerial meetings, last year, our ministerial meeting, the Global Clean Energy Action Forum, was hosted by the US Department of Energy. It convened more than 6,000 energy professionals. It brought together 34 governments who attended, mostly at ministerial level. We brought together, and we saw the participation of 400 C-suite executives joined from the private sector and leading industries. 9 CEO minister roundtables were held on various topics, including the just transition. 22 of our SEM work streams contributed to an action-filled agenda that spanned nearly 120 side events. And one of the highlights of the event was definitely that member governments pledged to contribute $90 billion in the clean energy investment space, which is really a big step for clean energy deployment. Next slide, please. And the second feature that makes SEM really unique is not necessarily only the ministerial meetings that convene once a year, but more importantly, our year-round technical work in the form of SEM initiatives and campaigns. So we currently have 21 active SEM work streams that really form a very powerful and comprehensive work program that cover various sectors, from energy to transport to industry to buildings to fuels, and also to the enabling environment. And when we think of these work streams, they're not static, but they're government-led work streams that are quite dynamic. So they really represent and mirror the emergence of existing and new priorities from our member governments, because they are subject to constant renewal, subject to evolutions, and sometimes even graduation. And then taken together, these 21 SEM work streams really paint a very comprehensive picture of the various sectors and challenges that exist within the energy transition and that need to be tackled very soon. From electricity to smart grids to green steel and cement to super efficient appliances to electric vehicles to gender equality, and even more recently, topics such as employment and green skills, as my colleagues will talk about later. Next slide, please. And the Clean Energy Ministerial has really helped to drive progress in each of these sectors and in each of these areas by bringing together stakeholders and actors who actively work together and produce concrete actions that then eventually lead to real impacts and outcomes. So this is maybe best illustrated in the transport sector, where we've seen very visible and tangible results already. So one example is our SEM EV30 at 30 initiative, which has set the target of reaching 30% shares of electric vehicles by 2030, and is also actively measuring and monitoring the progress made in each member country. Equally impressive, the SEM Drive to Zero campaign aims to enable and accelerate the growth of zero-emission commercial vehicles around the world by making them cost competitive by 2025 and implementing them wide scale by 2040. So in partnership with the Dutch government, for example, Drive to Zero has put forward a global MOU, which commits countries to reach 100% zero emission sales of new trucks and buses by 2040, which is really one of its kind in the transport sector. So there are plenty of examples of how the SEM works in specific sectors and through specific technologies. And I invite everyone to visit our SEM official website after this session to have a closer look at our sectoral work and work streams. Next slide, please. And last but not least, the SEM has also proven as a very important and complementary platform for the ambitions and commitments that are made at COP and the G20 and G7. So as mentioned earlier, the relationship with COP and SEM really dates back to the Copenhagen Climate Summit. So in the early years between 2010 and 2015, SEM was often closely coordinated, closely referenced with the Major Economies Forum and also with the Paris Agreement, and being explicitly referenced to contributing to COP ambitions and commitments made in Paris. And today, COP continues to have a very strong representation within SEM workstream, but also at the SEM Secretariat level. So the SEM works very closely with the COP presidencies, the UK COP presidency 2 years ago, but also this year's COP presidency UAE, to make sure that a lot of SEM work streams are featured and also make high-level announcement and new pledges at the COP. Also, the COP has become a place for SEM to talk about their work and to feature some of the recent commitments. Also, what we've seen since 2016 is an increasing trend of SEM workstreams being referenced in G7 and G20. So the first G20 reference of the SEM was back in 2016, with SEM's work on energy efficiency being referenced in the G20 Energy Efficiency Action Plan. And soon after, in 2017, we've also seen that SEM has been regularly featured in G7 communiques, such as the Equal by 30 campaign, which looks at gender in the clean energy space, and also the G7 Hydrogen Action Pact, which has referenced the SEM Hydrogen Initiative, but also the G7 Industrial Decarbonization Agenda, which strongly references SEM's IDDI work. And this relationship with the G20 is likely going to grow this and next year as India and Brazil will host this and next year's ministerial meeting respectively alongside their G20 presidencies. So these examples show really how the CEM is not an isolated feature, but it's really integrated and inextricably linked to the G20, the G7, and the COP processes, and that it's really much part of the global energy landscape and global discussions around climate change. Next slide, please. And I'd really like to just close with an invitation to everyone in this session and invite you to join our upcoming ministerial meeting, which will be hosted by the government of India from the 19th to 22nd of July in the city of Goa in India. So it will be held back to back with the Energy Transition Ministerial meeting. We really welcome you to join our global community to reach net zero by 2050. Thank you very much, and thanks for your attention, and back to you, Frank.
The invitation, which has been well received in this room, so you all have been invited to go out July this year if you wish. But thank you, Melisande, also for the, let's say, presentation of the far-reaching and comprehensive CEM community and forum and its cooperation, many initiatives, and for highlighting the added value and need for coordinated action to net zero in this context. You stressed that CEM activities do include a focus on people and on consumers. Our next two speakers will address these two issues. Before going there, maybe just to say that the CEM summit in Pittsburgh last year indeed was the first one, to my knowledge, which did host a ministerial roundtable focusing on the issue of just transition. So it also addressed the issues raised in the introduction and brought together labor and energy side in the context of CEM. For this year's event in India, also side events are proposed to continue let's say, following the work on the Empowering People initiative, which will be presented in a second, but also we have suggested exploratory work in a side event looking at energy demand, the energy demand side, and related issues of sustainable lifestyles or sufficiency in this context. So also discuss in a context of energy, focusing on energy technology traditionally, also these issues. With this, thank you again, Melisande, for your presentation. Please stay with us for the further discussion. And with this, I would like to come and welcome to our next speaker and welcome Mrs. Annette Hollers. Annette is manager at Natural Resources Canada, one of the Empowering People Initiative co-leads, and probably the founder and the initiator of the Empowering People Initiative. So Annette Hollers will present to us today the Empowering People Initiative and sum up the developments of the initiative since its launch in 2021. Annette, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Frank, and it's really great to see you again. I'm really delighted to be here today to discuss how we can work together to accelerate the clean energy transition and the important work, as you had mentioned, that the EPI is doing to advance people-centered transitions. We get the next slide. You can move to the next one. That's great, thank you. So the clean energy industry, as many of us know, and as Frank had alluded to as well, is really facing and needs to rapidly scale and to meet market demand and urgent climate change mitigation measures, while also operating within the very challenging educational, sociocultural, and other frameworks as more established industries have gone before us. It's worth repeating as well that everyone needs to be included if we are to meet the unprecedented need for talent to meet bold clean energy and decarbonization goals. Yet awareness of career opportunities in the clean energy industry is really lacking in many markets. And even where awareness exists, career and educational pathways into clean energy are not always clearly defined or accessible, especially for those with additional barriers to participation in the workforce. And there's work to be done there to improve. To help address these challenges, as Frank had mentioned, Canada, the US, and the European Commission launched the Empowering People Initiative at the annual EUSEW Ministerial in 2021. And really at the crux of the initiative, the EPI seeks to highlight critical socioeconomic elements of the energy transition. And our main goals are really to empower people and to promote just and equitable transitions by advancing skills, inclusivity, and workforce development. And as on this slide, as you could see, we don't and we can't really do that alone. We really work with governments and other stakeholders to promote equity and inclusivity while leveraging the Clean Energy Ministerial and other initiatives that could benefit from greater emphasis on the human aspects of the shift to our low carbon economy. Next slide, please. So just to give you a flavor of some of the key outcomes we're looking to achieve, really this work stream looks to include and identify needed areas of growth, especially in the areas of skills attainment and contributing to enabling policy environments for an inclusive clean energy workforce. We believe that the SEM membership is very well positioned to act as change agents by helping to bring new voices and perspectives to the table to discuss the challenges and opportunities for the workforce of the future and to collaborate on solutions. And traditionally, and Melisande went over some of this, it's energy ministerials and the energy community that comes together. But we know when we're thinking about people-centered transitions that we have to think about other actors and players, whether it's from labor, from education, from skills ministries, for example. So we have, in the last couple of years that we've been in existence, really been piloting an approach where we bring in some of those maybe non-traditional players, but ones that really need to be seated at the table as we think about the workforce of tomorrow. Next slide, please. So just to give you a flavor of some of our most recent projects, as I had mentioned before, we work closely with like-minded partners to bring forward novel approaches and diverse perspectives in achieving a just and equitable transition for a clean energy future. And I liked some of the words that Melisande used, roll up your sleeves and practical and bottoms-up approach. And that's really what we're attempting to do in this space. Just to give you kind of one of our key projects of last year in 2022. Frank had alluded to this as well, but we partnered with the International Energy Agency to build on the work of the IEA's Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions. A report was released, and that report, which we launched at SEM 13 in Pittsburgh, aims to support countries interested in adopting any of the Commission's recommendations and committing to their implementation with the goal to ensure that all workers can benefit from new job opportunities in the clean energy transition. The report's review of existing skills and training programs provides valuable insights for others embarking on their own clean energy transitions, which will be beneficial as we work towards an evidence-driven, people-centered approach. And I'd really invite folks in the room and online to take a look at this report. It has some really excellent case studies from all over the globe, and we have that linked here, but you can easily Google it, I believe, as well. And given that the EPI is a horizontal initiative under the SEM, we also look to build on and complement existing SEM work streams and to really bring out some of the people-centered aspects of many of these technical work streams. We feel that's really critically important. So to pilot that last year, we partnered with the SEM's International Smart Grid Action Network, or ISCAN for short, to develop a new awards theme for the 2022 ISCAN Award of Excellence on Smart Grid Workforce Development for an Inclusive Energy Transition. So that was the first time that a people-centered award was attached to that awards program. The new award theme highlighted organizations working towards achieving an inclusive smart grid workforce, recognizing the importance of a highly skilled and diverse workforce and the need to promote just and equitable transitions for a successful clean energy transition. And we successfully awarded an organization in person in Pittsburgh this past year. That was the India Smart Grid Forum, an excellent organization that is doing great work in this space. Last year, we also partnered with the SEB's Clean Energy Solutions Center, or CESC for short, to host a webinar in December where we heard experts describe opportunities, challenges, and solutions to prepare the workforce for just and inclusive clean energy transitions. The webinar was attended by 117 participants from across 66 countries. So, we had some great global reach there, which was very, very exciting. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, we talked a bit about this. Both Frank and Melisande spoke about GOA, where the next Clean Energy Ministerial, alongside Vision Innovation and G20, is being held. The EPI will look to build on the work and conversations held during 2022, the 2022 India General Assembly last year, and then also CEM 13, as well as the most recent senior officials meeting in Rio. We have 2 side events that are connected to EPI, and Frank described one of these, but just to give a bit of a plug again, its focus will be on sustainable lifestyles, and we know that lifestyle changes are going to be a key enabler for clean energy transitions, and the session will address the important question of energy demand reduction and behavioral changes necessary to reduce global emissions. We also have another EPI-related event, a separate session, where we will discuss what is needed for effective collaboration to share information and scale solutions, including concrete action steps the participants can leverage in their countries and regions. So really, again, getting back to that practical element around solutions that are so very needed and rapidly. This will also be an opportunity to highlight some of the progress we've made on our work plan this year. And in particular, we look forward to making some announcements about some upcoming partnerships that we have on the horizon. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. I'd like to give a bit of an overview, but keep this part short on a project that we are undertaking right now, and the reason for keeping it short is because the next speaker will do a much deeper dive and will do a much better justice. But just to highlight what that project is about, we're looking to in the next month, and particularly in Goa, present the initial outcomes of this new project that we launched earlier this year with funding and support from ClimateWorks. That's a philanthropic organization. And the title of this project is the Integrated Policymaking and Empowering Communications for the Clean Energy Economy and Workforce, IPEC for short. The IPEC aims to help governments develop more holistic and integrated workforce preparation and just transition policies and programs, and overcome fragmented approaches between the relevant ministries. More than 100 countries have responded to the call to accelerate solutions to support just transitions, including extensive representation from countries residing in the global south, and that's something that we've been very pleased about. Outcomes of the first phase of the project include 4 live interactive solution summits, a compendium of resources, and a toolkit for policymakers. And we've already had a few of those solution summits, and our next speaker will go into more detail on those. Before we invite that next speaker, though, I just wanted to take a very quick moment to invite you all to stay connected with EPI. And so that's just my last slide there, if you can switch it over. Recognizing that working towards an inclusive clean energy future is a joint effort, the EPI welcomes new partners and collaboration. So please get in touch. Feel free to reach out to the Subsecretariat if you're interested in learning more about EPI and how we may be able to work together. We also have a landing page on the Clean Energy Ministerial website. So I invite you to look for us there. A lot of great links and resources there. And then we also have both a Twitter account and a LinkedIn page, and really invite you to find us there. I will drop those in my chat, recognizing that not everyone in the room would be able to see that. So maybe there's a way to get that to folks that are listening online or in the room. And then finally, we'd also invite you to join our fourth Virtual Solutions Summit, which is a virtual convening through our IPEC project to share lessons learned and participate with an excellent network of policymakers working towards advancing people-centered clean energy transitions. And again, our next speaker is going to do a much deeper dive and a bigger plug there. And with that, I'll just complete and conclude the presentation, but just to say thank you so much for listening, and we do hope to hear from some of you in the near future. Back over to you, Frank.
Thank you very much, Annette. Thank you very much for presenting the Empowering People Initiative and the work done so far and the work ahead. As you have presented, this is a rolling work program. It's very much a hands-on rolling work program which evolves as we speak, and we're looking forward to the next steps. Thank you also for both to Melisande and you for reminding to us that we should roll up our sleeves. To be honest, given the high temperatures here on this summer day in Brussels, I think most of us would like to do that as fast as we can, but there are two more speakers to go. And please bear with me, Deborah. We will come to the presentation of the IPEC initiative after one other speaker from the European Commission. The IPEC initiative, which tries to, let's say, promote, as we probably call it in our documents, a whole of government approach, also in the context of the Empowering People Initiative. But before coming to you, Deborah, I would like to invite a colleague from the Commission. So it's Mrs. Adela Tesarova. Adela is Head of Unit for Consumers, Local Initiatives and Just Transition at DG Energy. DG Energy is the lead Directorate-General in the Commission on cooperation with the Clean Energy Ministerial. And obviously, you're one of the leading units in designing and implementing policies and measures to ensure that the transitions and the energy transition we are speaking about are fair and socially just. So with this, Adela, I think you will probably bring us a bit closer to the consumer perspective in all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank, and good afternoon, everyone. Maybe I start from what kind of energy system we are transitioning from, because I think it's also important to keep that in mind. The current energy system is based on fossil fuels, is highly unequal. The wealth or the capital, the income is concentrated in a very few hands. We have seen it now through the energy crisis, where majority suffered and the minority had increased income, increased revenues. Of course, from the European perspective, also the majority of the system is imported. Majority of our energy is imported, so the wealth even goes outside of the EU. The energy consumer currently is a very passive consumer, doesn't need to have any skills. The energy consumer just needs to know how to pay an invoice, which for some of us might be also difficult, but the level of skills for energy consumer is very limited. You just need to find a plug and the energy comes from the wall. But it is a highly unequal system. Yeah? And we have, even before the crisis, we had about 10% of the population which was not able to pay their energy bills. And then energy crisis came and many more people struggled with their energy bills. And maybe that was the wake-up call we needed in Europe, because there is, I think, much more the kind of empathy grow with people who are not able to pay their energy bills, because even middle-income families all of a sudden struggled, and now they could understand what it must mean if you cannot afford energy. And that's something we didn't have in Europe before. So that's the energy system of the past, and we are transitioning away from it. And the new green energy system offers potentially much fairer and much different approach to energy. But of course, we need to be careful so that we don't lose the people we have already lost in the transition, and maybe more people. Because of course, some people have good jobs in the existing energy system, And these people we can lose as we transition. Yeah. But we also should not forget about those who have struggled already in the fossil fuel system, and we might not pay enough attention to them during the transition. That's why the European Green Deal has a just transition pillar and has the objective not to leave anyone behind. So we have been thinking about the workers in the carbon-intensive sectors or carbon-intensive regions, but we're also thinking about the individuals, those who were suffering with their fossil fuel bills, and they risk maybe not being on board in the transition. So the transition is potentially good, but we have to be careful how we design our policies. And the new energy system will be very different from the past. We are talking about decentralized energy system where we don't have a few producers, but we will have a multitude of producers, and many of these producers will be also consumers. So in fact, the new energy system will require completely different skills, both from the workers, but also from the users. There is a lot of social innovation which needs to happen so that we all can engage with energy in a completely different way, and not being passive consumer and payer of bills, but we can become actor of the transition. We can renovate our houses. We can produce directly renewable energy or participate in schemes to have direct access to renewable energy. So energy, the new energy is much more like a food system, where some people buy in the supermarket, some people produce their food themselves, some people have access to allotments available by the municipality and they can grow their own food. Some people go to the market, some people buy directly from the farmer. So that's the energy system of the future. Much more diversity, less concentration, and many more decentralized actors. But of course, as I said, this means completely different skill set from everyone. And there are a lot of new jobs coming with the new energy system in energy efficiency, heat pumps, that's the new kid on the block. You know, we need installers, we need technicians. We are trying to promote not only uptake of new technologies, but also production of new technologies. There is the clean tech, global, every country in the world wants to get into clean tech and wants to produce these technologies. And this will bring completely new jobs and completely new skills. So need to reskill our workers. But I go back to the social innovation. Every single user of energy might need to participate as well. So the skill requirements on individuals are changing drastically, and we need to adapt. So there is a lot of skill development for consumers to be able to participate actively in this transition. So basically with the new system, we are kind of giving power back to the people. That's how energy started. You know, back in the past, people were collecting the wood in the forest and they were taking care of their energy needs. And we are going back to that system. Of course, it doesn't mean that we will, that consumers will be the only actors in the energy system. We will still have energy companies, but we will have much more diversity of offers coming from energy companies. There are many more market players in the energy market with the green transition. We not only have traditional suppliers, but we have companies that operate with demand flexibility. We have aggregators. We have completely different actors. So that all is changing. And some people see that there is a bit of tension between the old system and the new system. Yeah, that empowered consumers are risk-taking business away from big energy companies. So there is sometimes opposition to the transition because people feel that they will be losing the markets. I think this is exaggerated, of course, but there is some tension, certainly in Europe or in those countries where everyone has access to energy. But we also have countries where people still don't have access to energy. I think we have 700 million people around the globe who don't have access to energy. And for these people, there is no tension at all because no one wants these customers currently. And hence, the new energy system is bringing opportunities for these people to actually get access to energy by themselves. So we see energy communities emerging around the globe in communities that have been so far excluded from access to energy. We see renewables picking up in Africa, picking up in communities where people didn't have electricity or they didn't have enough electricity. And this is bottom up, people who engage themselves in communities and they install solar panels and they share the electricity between themselves. And it is grassroots initiatives, and it's very positive. So yeah, there is also the aspect of addressing pre-existing inequalities given with a lack of access to energy. So of course, this is maybe final reflection now. All this is a very complex process. A lot of it happening bottom up, a lot of it happening through global cooperation. I think the big challenge is to make sure that everyone remains on board, that we reach out to all communities, and that we manage to engage people who maybe were left behind in the previous system, and that we pay enough attention to energy poor and vulnerable consumers in particular, and that we get them on board. And it also means, maybe linking to the next intervention, it also means working across different layers of government, working with different actors, local actors, cities, municipalities, working across departments to make sure that we have comprehensive policies and we kind of manage to link everything together for the benefit of the transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adela, and thank you very much for highlighting the need to look at the consumer dimension, prosumer dimension, energy poverty. Already before the energy price hike, more than 35 million people, according to our statistics in Europe, couldn't afford to heat or cool their homes properly. That figure probably was at risk, or it has gone up during the crisis, and certainly deserves a lot of our attention. And thank you also for highlighting, let's say, the power and the important contribution of social innovations, of other tools that we need to develop in this context. Also on the DG employment side, we have launched last year a call for social innovations for fair, green and digital transitions to invite local communities, social economy actors, small companies, SMEs, micro-enterprises to come up with new ideas, to design and test and pilot ideas, how to bring about fair transitions on the ground, because I think we need to collect such ideas. We're about to kick off some 20 projects in this context, and many of those, like you have described the power of digital tools or new tools that can inform consumers, that consumers can use, are also suggested to be used in other cases, for example, to link the food sector and with the social economy to avoid food waste, or new ways to reskill, upskill people, including migrants and refugees, who can also play an important part in, let's say, taking forward the energy transition. Then the title of our initiative, the title of the session, Empowering People, is very broad in this context. So thank you for having broadened it and for having brought in these many initiatives. With this, I would like to turn to Deborah. Now it's really your turn. You're our fourth speaker, Deborah Rowe. And we would like to invite you, Deborah, to present us one of the concrete examples on how the Empowering People initiative is supporting the implementation of fair transitions through the IPEC initiative, which was already mentioned before. Deborah, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much, everybody. I loved listening. And now I'm very excited to share with you some very useful and practical resources. So if we can have the first slide, please. So I'm the project lead on this workforce development initiative, but it goes beyond workforce. It's also getting all the other parts of our society to work effectively so that we can get just clean energy transitions. You've heard about its title. I won't repeat it. You'll see that website over and over again. Please go, because lots of resources are there. And thank you to the co-leads of Canada, the United States, the European Commission, and of course, all housed within the Clean Energy Ministerial. Next slide, please. So that you've heard, but now I'm going to slow down a bit, because what are we actually doing to get to the solutions and to scale them to the levels that we need? So in our series of solution summits, and other items that you'll hear about in the next few minutes. We are understanding the gaps, not only in clean energy workforce, but also in building the clean energy economy. My background, I spent 42 years as a professor of renewable energy technology, energy management, and sustainable development, teaching those people who were going to go out into the field, either as employees or as employers, and also teaching those who were the consumers and the policymakers. I also owned a solar and energy management firm, both retail and wholesale, so understood what the needs were from those who were trying to implement the solutions from the business sector. And then as president of the U.S. partnership, we had multiple sector teams, so governments and communities and higher ed and the younger years of K-12, business, interfaith, all working together to try to create these solutions and working with higher ed networks for sustainability all over the world, and lots of different initiatives. So now we come together to look at, we have to accomplish two things simultaneously. We have to structure the economy so that it is there for the just clean energy transition. And then we also have to make sure the workforce is ready and the consumers are ready and the employers are ready. So looking at what's going on and understanding the gaps, that's number one. Secondly, sharing the successes that have already occurred and looking at how we can take them to scale. And third, we all hit barriers, we hit roadblocks. So working with each other, building a community of support and practice to overcome those barriers. Next slide, please. So we have this interactive Solution Summit series. We'll have the fourth one on July 6th, as you heard. I think the link that Annette gave had an S for solutions. You got to take out that S. So it's Solution Summit 4, and then you'll get to the registration page, but you'll also get my slides that has the same link. And sorry for that. That may have been the way I sent it to you. I don't know, but we'll correct. It's there corrected in these slides. Not only is it very interactive, so we have people from all over the world talking about what they're actually doing, but we also bring in experts. We then have vetted the resources. There are so many resources on this, on workforce development and also clean energy economy development. So it's not totally comprehensive, but there's a great set of resources we've developed. And we've also given examples of two things, policies and programs, because you need both. Policies alone sitting on the books don't make it happen. Programs where we can empower the implementers in our society. Once again, we've got to take it to scale at a pace we're not used to working. That's what we're doing through this series, is helping to make that happen. And then these things are brought together into a toolkit. The toolkit's just being finished now, and it'll probably be the first in the series. Next slide. So who comes to these things? Well, it says there are 90 countries registered. Actually, there's over 100 countries where we have people coming and giving those perspectives and helping to create solutions. But attendees come from the different sectors of society, and you can see the list there. Next slide, please. What are we focusing on? Well, a lot of workforce development has focused on just curricula. And if you do just that, it will not work. So we focus on, how do you recruit people into the clean energy fields? How do you provide accurate, up-to-date career advising about what the career pathways are? How do you then update the curricula, both in standalone programs like solar and wind, etc., but also integrating it into existing programs like electrical programs, engineering programs, business school programs, transportation, automotive programs, trucks, other forms of transportation, heating and cooling, but also those university programs. We found that universities, because energy doesn't exist as a discipline, it tends to get lost. It shows up first in engineering and business schools, but every academic area has a unique and important contribution to make to educate the consumers, the investors, the community members who are voters, and those who cannot vote but are still part of the community, and also the workers and the owners So all of that, every single academic area can contribute to that. Psychology is so crucial, for example, in behavior change, right? And so we have actually over 65 in the US, and then many, many more around the world, academic societies that have been weighing in on this, but we need to do more and faster. Then we also focus, besides the curricula, on job placement. To have it streamlined, we need to roll out the welcome carpet to the companies and the organizations that are working so hard to try and meet the science-based targets for climate solutions. And so we've heard examples of where they contact a university or a TVET and they don't get the workers that they need. So we've created tip sheets for organizations that are coming to these training and educational organizations on how you get to the right people so you can get the employees that you need. So that's job placement, but also retention. How do you have a welcoming culture that makes sure that the people who come feel like they want to stay? And that means working with the employer organizations. We've also focused on marginalized populations, as the last few speakers have talked about. Very important, requires extra efforts, very worthwhile. And then fixing organizational and societal systems. As long as we're doing this transition, many of us know what's broken in our societies and in our organizations. So we have a whole focus on how you can be an intrapreneur, a change agent from within, to help fix those organizations and society as a whole as we do this just clean energy transition and really help to get to the potential that we have as human beings to live in a sustainable way on this planet with higher quality of life for all. Next slide, please. So we're very practical, but we set those goals and those areas of focus. Here's some examples of expert speakers. We had the chair of the board of directors of the Global Wind Organization, and he presented his standards that they've created and their learning tasks. And then he said, we want to work with individual countries to help you develop your curricula. So we focus on not just having people talk at you, but at opportunities where you can all engage. We had the head of SolarWorks, who I know is here at this event, from Solar Power Europe. They created a wonderful jobs platform, and they were going to create it for just Europe. I said, please don't, because then we have to create it in all these other countries again. So they thought about it, and they said, okay, we're going to create an international jobs platform. You can go there and see the skills for solar. You can go there and do a matchmaking between potential employees and employers. You can see access to different educational opportunities. Next slide. Other speakers that we've had and opportunities that we've shared is IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency, is developing a free curricula. It'll be done at the end of the summer for the earlier educational grades. So, young people, so they can start to see themselves as being clean energy heroes for their communities, for their countries, and start to think about that as an educational pathway. They have a new network that you can join. The links to all of these are in the speaker notes for the slides, which I believe you're going to get afterwards. And then also ICLEI is Local Governments for Sustainability, and we brought in the World Secretariat along with their colleague from Mission Innovation. ICLEI has worked very closely with us to gather the resources that are available in higher education to help your countries, your communities, to get these solutions done. I know lots of times it's a human capacity problem. You just don't have enough people to do it. Well, there are a couple of great programs, global programs from higher education. One brings in pro bono, that's free, scientists and other climate and clean energy experts who are willing to volunteer their time to help local projects happen effectively. And then they also have access to all of these graduate students who don't want to do just papers that get graded and handed back, but they want to work on real world projects. And so we have a process to help improve the capacity of your organization, your country, your community by utilizing these resources. And then also, of course, city and local governments. So let's get this done by really coordinating our efforts. And that's what we do through the series, is we give you information on these opportunities. Next slide, please. So I told you that we vetted resources. Yeah, so that's the quick link, tinyurl.com/IPEC. IPEC's the name of the project, -resources. That will take you to papers, policies, programs, opportunities. They're all there in a summarized form. Not totally comprehensive, but a lot of great stuff there that you will be able to utilize. So it's like a gift. Here's a gift to you. We've brought you these gifts today. Next slide. We focused on convening stakeholders so that we can build coordinated outcomes, because otherwise we tend to be fragmented, duplicative, redundant. We don't have time for that. Next slide. So who are these stakeholders? And we've talked about how you don't have to be in a position of authority to convene them. So Lurjan, who's the coordinator at IPEC, and myself, we just convened all these stakeholders when we first did this in the US before we went international. And we said, you know, somebody needs to do this. And so we're just going to do it. So with our informal knowledge of all of these different groups, and then our willingness to reach out to those we didn't know, we now have the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance with over 600 organizations who have been working together over a year on building these solutions. And that's just one example. You know, we've had people come from multiple countries talking about how they felt the need to build these coalitions as well. So we go through how you do that. And here's the stakeholders from within government. You know, we often will include education, and we'll include the industry, and we'll include the energy, climate, environment groups. But we also have to remember to include labor and economic development. And because they pass policies and they have funds sometimes, right? They can really help us get this done. And then also social affairs and well-being, because it's got to be an inclusive transition. And that's where we're going to make sure that that happens. And we can reach out to everyone in the country to be a part of it and create compelling visions of sustainable communities, even in a climate unstable world. Next slide. Those are the stakeholders from within government. Now you have the stakeholders from society. So you have the implementing organizations, the employers and industry, but also the industry associations that can quickly filter information out to a lot of employers, the nonprofits, the local governments, the organized labor. And when you go to education, you don't just get a few institutions. You've got to open it up to all of them, but also bring in those key decision-making groups, the accreditation bodies, the curricular decision-making groups. And sometimes we're weak in the career advising and in the recruitment piece. So make sure we support them in this work. Next slide. So you can convene all of them. We have some models for that. We have an action plan template. You can also talk to those who have been coming to these international summits that we've been holding at the Empowering People Initiative. That's our LinkedIn group, our email listserv, and you're welcome to join. Next slide. So if you want more information, that's my email. I know how busy you all are. I want to honor you for being here today and taking in this information. But even more so, I want to honor you for when these slides come, that you click on those links, that you engage in these solutions, and that you let us help you get to the sustainable future we all need and deserve. Thank you.
In the beginning, Deborah Rove, you are president of the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much for sharing with us a wealth of information resources directly available. It's very easy to say that we should be promoting an integrated approach to these questions of inclusiveness, workforce development, and the clean energy transition. It's very easy to say that we should attract, retain workers, that we should reskill, upskill them, but it's very hard to do in practice. And a lot of the resources you're providing here are a guide to that, are a guide to good examples and to progress forward in many of those. And obviously that's not work which is finished, by far not. The solution summits will continue, and we invite also people following us online or here in the room to come up with ideas and questions as regards the way forward and the needs. And last but not least, I would like to thank you as well, Deborah, for being a change agent, for building these national just transition alliances with us, and for calling upon all of us to become or be such a change agent from within ourselves. Before coming to the discussion, I would like to refer to one initiative which was launched at the COP last year, co-hosted by the European Commission and Just Transition Pavilion already mentioned, and that's a Green Jobs for Youth Pact, a pact which was launched together by UNEP, UNICEF, the ILO, and co-hosted by the European Commission. And I think a lot of the resources you have shown, for example, can also be useful in such a situation, because promoting green jobs for youth will be one of the, let's say, key success factors for our clean energy transition, not only at European level, obviously, but at global level overall. With this, I would like to invite all of you to come in with your questions, and I think, Pablo, we have received some first questions, so I don't know if they will be shown on the screen, or if not, we read them out.
They should be showing now. Otherwise, you can start reading. This is the very first and easy one.
So the first one. So, first question, will the slides be shared? Yes, everything will be shared, including all the links which will work, and also I think the session will be recorded and can be watched again if you wish. Another question which came in is to you, Adela. Which is the best concrete example, initiative, policy, or measure on a fair energy transition that the EU should promote internationally? And one question coming in to you, Deborah. Can anyone join the IPEC summits, even if they were not involved in the past ones? Maybe we start with you, Deborah. Can anyone be involved? Is there still time to register to follow?
Yes, and we encourage you to be involved because there aren't enough people with this in their job descriptions. So anyone who's interested, we're here to empower you and to give you the resources and the connections so that you can help make it happen. I also just want to add on that Green Jobs for Youth initiative that you announced. There was actually a global guidance document that I co-authored with UNEP staff, and it is on our resources list, and it is on a framework and a number of resources on Green Jobs for Youth.
Now it works. I would have liked to ask one follow-up question to you, Deborah, before we go to Adela. The question is, from IPEC experience, what are the biggest difficulties when making different parts of governments and organizations to sit and work together?
People who don't show up and people who waste time in meetings. Okay, that was an off-the-cuff answer, but that's definitely part of the answer.
But you invite them to come and sit together and share time in meetings.
Oh, absolutely. And when they don't show up, we come back. You know, I'm really just someone who nudges people, right? We can see what's possible. It's right here. So now we just have to get it done. So you contact them multiple times. When you're on webinars, you collect the participants, and so that they can be invited too. You make sure to talk and share these compelling visions. And then you keep empowering them and bring them the connections so that they can make it happen. But what gets in the way are people who say, this isn't in my job description. My job was an instructor at a TVET, but I just looked at what needed to be done and stepped up. And I've met so many wonderful people around the world who are doing the same thing. So when you get more deeply embedded in creating these solutions, there's not time for doom and gloom, because it's exciting to be part of making this happen.
Thank you very much. And I think it's an experience we're living, all of us, also here in Europe, that the Green Deal is really a game changer in breaking silos and making us work together across departments. We see that on all sides, where the energy side, and we have seen that, has to address employment, labor-related issues, social issues, and where at the same time actors on our side, people from the labor, employment ministries, social affairs ministries, as you mentioned, suddenly are asking, do I have to know about these national energy and climate plans? What's in there for me? Do I have to understand these processes? Yes, probably you do. Probably you have to talk to each other. And when we monitor the progress towards putting in place a just transition, we have to bring these work strands and knowledge together. And I feel that's something happening. And the nice thing about your solution summits is that this is happening, and that one of the nice features, added values of SEM, I think, is that you bring together this international community, all types of actors from government, industry, civil society, and others, who can share this wealth of good examples, good ideas, on how we can ensure a fair transition. Because let's be honest, we don't know what the exact recipe is. We have to design these answers while we are in the transition and evaluate and assess them while we are walking the talk, and therefore these kind of initiatives I think are very important. Back to you, maybe Adela, which according to you is the best or one concrete example on fair energy transition that you should promote internationally?
So I think it's difficult to find one example, but I would mention maybe two areas. One area where EU is very solicited in sharing our example internationally is the initiative of coal regions in transition. In Europe, we have strong base of coal in the power sector in several member states, and this has been this has been a blocker for the EU to agree on climate neutrality for many years, but we have overcome that blocker. And the initiative of coal regions in transition is the way Commission facilitated this process was to bring together people in the regions, as you just discussed. So the current employers, the employees, the trade unions, NGOs, other types of civil society, the municipalities, and to allow them to discuss the future of the regions, which they have been doing for quite some time. And then EU brought finance to this, to finance the just transition. So we are now financing new job opportunities in these regions. But what was the beginning, and that was very important, was to bring different actors together and help people in the region to think the new strategy for themselves. So no one told them, this is your way out of coal, but it was for the people in the region to decide themselves and then see what comes next. Yeah. So that's one example, and we are actually working internationally with some key countries such as South Africa, Vietnam, Indonesia, others. Also, it's an initiative in the context of G7, where the big G7 countries kind of work always with one additional big emitter on kind of how to do the coal phase out in a fair way and how to approach it. So that's one example. And then other example I could mention is consumer empowerment, which is again something which is happening around the globe. I have already been mentioning the example of energy communities, for example, in Rio de Janeiro, in the favelas, where you have people who, there is a lot of community spirit anyway. And so the energy is now come to that. And so you have energy communities which are formed to install solar panels and to share energy among themselves. And of course, the same is happening also in the EU. Maybe I can mention a nice example from Brussels. Shall I stop here? Is it too long? No. Nice example from Brussels we went to see recently. It is a social housing project where the social housing company installed solar panels on the building, and together with some NGOs that operate in the area, because it's usually people with low income, also often immigrants, people with low education, and so a lot of barriers for their integration in society. So they formed an energy sharing scheme where all these tenants who are not owners, they are not owners of the solar panels, but they share the renewable energy among themselves. And of course, this has an important impact on the inclusion within the community. It's very positive and also has an impact on empowerment of the people. And it can be a starting first step for the people maybe to find better jobs or, to become active. We have also met pensioners who are part of this scheme, and they are gaining new skills, and it was extremely a positive experience. And for me, it was like the best example what green energy can do to people and how empowered people look in practice and all the positive benefits that come. Of course, they save some money as well because it's cheaper, but the main benefits come really with the social inclusion in the community.
Thank you very much. I guess you now can also see some of the questions on the screen or online. So maybe, Annette, there's a question regarding the Empowering People initiative. How can an organization get in contact with the initiative to develop projects? Are there limitations to which type of organization you can work with? And I don't know if you can also have ideas on the follow-up question, as there were references made to tapping into the migrant community for re-upskilling initiatives related to the green transition. Are there any practical examples we can refer to, either in the Empowering People initiative context or more broadly?
Yes, thank you for that question. And absolutely, anyone can get involved. And we're a pretty flexible initiative. We don't want to put too many barriers around the types of organizations that we're looking to partner with. So I would say to this person, please do feel free to reach out, and we're always happy to speak with you. If you go to the Clean Energy Ministerial landing page and you search for the Empowering People Initiative page, there are ways to get in touch there. We also have a coordinator for our initiative, and Melisande will link up with that person, and she's very, very efficient and on top of things, and so we can probably pretty quickly connect with you. So please do reach out and do join our Twitter feed and looked at our LinkedIn page as well. So those are ways to find us and to get involved in the community. I'd say, sorry, what was your follow-up question, Frank?
On involvement of the migrant community for reskilling, upskilling in the green transition. Do we have practical examples?
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is, there isn't a practical example that stands out. I would go and look to our the report that we commissioned with the International Energy Agency. We are looking more and more at examples in the global south. I know that's not always the exact same as the migrant community, but really we are taking a focused effort, and it does require effort. And Deborah raised this point as well, to make sure that we're shining a light on more marginalized communities. And I would say that if there are examples out there that you don't see in the work that we've already commissioned, please do reach out. I think that is a community that we want to make sure we're highlighting. They face very unique challenges, and we want to hear about what those challenges, barriers are, and work with partners to come up with those solutions. And another way that we're examining that is through the IPEC project as well, that Deborah is very ably leading. So please do reach out, and we do. I think we have a very good opportunity. We have strong reach. We have a great platform to showcase some of these examples that sometimes may otherwise get buried. So we really do want to showcase those examples.
Thank you very much. And I referred to an upcoming social innovation project, which we will be kicking off and supporting here in the Commission side. So feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to share information if you're interested on this particular project.
Frank, I just wanted to tell you the attendees at the last summit included migrants and refugee offices from different countries, and that we did spend time on the 61% of the people that work out of the informal economy, and what are the kinds of targeted policies and programs that you can do to make sure that we increase the prosperity of people who are not working in the formal economy. And of course that includes migrants and all of their special needs that come along with that position that they're in. So it's on our radar. It's about meeting human needs while also making the clean energy transition. And we are already talking to the attendees about how they want to work together on that. So that's in process, yes.
For further discussion, if that's of interest to all partners. One question I would like to ask to Melisande: how does CEM manage frictions between member countries during negotiations, as we see, for example, in COP or G20? Or you don't have any in CEM?
Thanks for the question. So the CEM is really about positive collaboration, and I think we've really done a very good job at navigating through this political landscape and really focusing on our sole mission and really not overstepping and having all the geopolitical tensions come in the CEM. So we're really very much action-oriented and devoted to one mission, and that is to drive the Clean Energy Ministerial worldwide. And in doing so, we also recognize that this must be a collaborative effort of all CEM member countries. So we've focused very much on this. We've focused on the positive collaboration we need to make, and we've had a very stable and affirmative CEM membership for the past decade.
Thank you very much. And Deborah, I would like to turn to you with a final question we have received addressed to you. How would you plan to make energy transition-related jobs attractive for students who are not sensitive to environmental topics?
Well, you know how I said I was a nudger, right? So I actually went to my own government and said, you need a national recruitment campaign. And so it's going to vary depending on country, right? So in my country, I've spent a lot of time working in poor communities. And a lot of people who are in those communities end up going into the military because they see that as the way out to more prosperity because of the benefits that come when you're in the military, and also to be able to be a hero for their country. So for us, the phrase, come be a clean energy hero for your country, ended up being a phrase that resonated and could give them an alternative to, instead of going into the military, they could go into a clean energy field and stay home with their families, with their communities. But in your community, it might be something different. So in fact, we asked in a polling question in our last summit, what kinds of recruitment efforts have you made? I actually think we're quite weak in us paying attention to that. Like I say, we pay attention to curricula and not recruitment. I also think we haven't listened carefully enough to the youth. So I mentor an international youth for climate education group, and they will tell you, and in fact, we're bringing some youth voices in. They went ahead and created entrepreneurship courses for the kinds of jobs and businesses that we need that they didn't see happening. So they have a lot to share with us about what's going to appeal to us to get into these fields, and also to those who are older as well. You get a lot of people that are anxious right now about climate change, and a lot of people that are doomed and gloomed. So by doing this work, we actually also improve the mental health of people who are just sitting there being worried instead of being part of the solutions. I also want to go back. If you go into the resources sheet just real quickly, you will find that in the last session we added in resources on solar-powered refrigerators for vaccines, for health clinics, for food storage and transport to reduce food insecurity and income insecurity. That's got some application to the migrant communities. I just want to make sure to add that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time is up, but a lot more to be discussed. So I would like to thank all speakers, participants, all of those asking questions for this session. I would like to thank Marie Lemmens and her team also for setting up this session, helping us with the technical setup of the session and the online contributions. All slides material will be shared and are available, and you have contacts if you want to reach out to all of us, so please do. And with this, I think I would like to ask all of you to enjoy the other events coming up in the European Sustainable Energy Week in the coming days. For example, you have sessions tomorrow on social reskilling, measures to combat local energy poverty, or on gender perspectives on socially fair transitions, and on Thursday sessions on accelerating just transitions in coal and carbon-intensive regions, and also on national energy and climate plans and recovery and resilience plans as strategic tools to boost investment in fair, clean energy transitions. With this, thank you for participation and enjoy the rest of the week.